The first flare went up before the plane even touched down. Heathrow's runways glowed with emergency beacons as protesters massed behind steel barricades, their voices clashing like rival armies. Some shouted his name with reverence, others spat it like a curse. And then the automatic doors parted, and Prince Harry stepped back onto British soil, on the 3rd anniversary of Queen Elizabeth II's death. Cameras exploded like artillery fire, flashes so bright they turned the arrival's hall into a battlefield. His jaw tightened, his eyes straight ahead, but his shoulders carried the weight of memory. The boy who had once walked behind a coffin in silence was now a man walking back into fire. The crowd fractured in real time. On one side, banners praising his charity work, his military service, his devotion to children. On the other, placards painted with words like traitor and disgrace. Chants tangled in the air, creating a storm of contradiction. "Welcome home, Harry," colliding with "Down with the Duke." Security officers locked arms as the sound threatened to break through glass. A woman collapsed against the rail, sobbing Diana's name, and for a moment the hall seemed to fold back in time to 1997, when grief had swallowed the city whole. But this was no funeral march. This was an ambush of the living. The motorcade moved fast. Black SUVs glided into formation, their lights strobing as Harry ducked into the rear seat. Outside, fists hammered against police shields, chants rolled like thunder, and smoke from red flares curled above the crowd, staining the night in fire. The convoy tore through the arteries of London, police bikes slicing ahead to clear blocked junctions. Protesters surged at corners, banging on metal as though each strike might crack the glass. Inside the car, Harry sat rigid, eyes flickering to the windows, watching the city measure him. He had been both its son and its exile, but now he was something else entirely, an unpredictable spark in a dynasty built on control. The air inside the convoy was electric with tension. A protection officer muttered updates into his earpiece. Crowd density, high. Chants, escalating. Police reinforcement requested. Harry said nothing. He turned his phone over in his hand, screen dark, and then set it face down on the leather seat. Somewhere in the distance, Big Ben tolled, each strike reverberating like a drumbeat of history. The anniversary hung over everything, the day Britain had lost its queen, and now the day her grandson returned to confront his family's future. And this is where you come in. What Harry faced next was no ordinary royal appearance. It was a collision of grief, rage, and expectation, played out under the relentless glare of the world's cameras. If you think this is just another royal headline, think again. Stay with us, because what unfolded in London that night was darker, louder, and more dangerous than anyone imagined. And before we dive deeper into this extraordinary story, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell icon, because the revelations ahead are going to shake the monarchy to its very core, and you don't want to miss a second of it. The convoy cut across the Thames, the water below reflecting the blaze of blue lights. Crowds lined the bridge, some waving flags, others jeering, their voices funneling into the steel and stone like war chants. A bottle arced through the air, shattering against the pavement just feet from the lead car. Police surged, dragging the culprit away, but the roar of the crowd only swelled. Inside the vehicle, Harry leaned forward, his reflection fractured across the bulletproof glass. He had walked battlefields before, flown helicopters under fire, but this battlefield was different. This was home. When the convoy finally slowed, the destination was clear, a discreet London hotel, chosen not for luxury but for security. The gates shut behind him with a slam, muffling the chants outside, but the echoes followed him in. In the quiet of the lobby, he exhaled for the first time since stepping off the plane. Staff stood frozen, unsure whether to bow or to look away. For them, too, he was no longer simply a prince. He was a storm contained in human form. He moved quickly, avoiding the marble mirrors, avoiding the weight of eyes that followed him. Upstairs, the curtains were already drawn. London lay just beyond them, a city that remembered everything and forgave nothing. He stood at the window anyway, pulling the fabric aside. The skyline glowed with red and blue, the smoke of flares drifting like ghosts. Somewhere out there, the Well Child Award stage was being set, microphones tested, names printed in programs. Tomorrow he would walk into that room, face families whose battles made his own look small, and yet the storm outside would follow him in. For now, he stared at the city, jaw tight, as if daring it to blink first. The following evening, the motorcade cut through London once more, but this time the destination was no secret. The Well Child Awards had been circled on Harry's calendar for months, just as it had been for nearly 2 decades. For 17 years he had been a patron, shaking hands with children whose courage outstripped their years, praising families who had turned daily suffering into daily triumph. But this year, the event felt less like a celebration and more like a crucible. The street outside the hotel was already swollen with noise. Protesters banged drums, their chants echoing off the glass towers. Some carried placards with his mother's face, a reminder that Diana's legacy lived in him. Others carried signs demanding he never be forgiven. And threading through it all were those who simply wanted to glimpse him. Curious onlookers clutching phones in the air, waiting for the frame that would prove they were there when history passed by. Inside the foyer, the atmosphere was utterly different. The noise of the crowd dimmed into something like reverence. The air hummed with the low murmur of families who had spent too many nights in hospital wards. Children in wheelchairs and on crutches lined the carpet, their eyes wide, their bodies decorated with courage that glimmered brighter than the jewels on the gowns around them. When Harry stepped onto the carpet, the cameras detonated again, an orchestra of clicks and flashes, but this time the energy was softer, warmer. He moved slowly, deliberately. A girl with no hair but a headband of glitter stars clutched her phone. He knelt to take the photo himself, holding the camera high so she could beam into the lens. The flash caught the tears in her mother's eyes. A boy in a wheelchair wore a cape made of hospital blankets. Harry bent down, asked about his favorite superhero, and the boy shouted, "You!" loud enough to cut through the hall. Applause broke out, rolling across the room like a tide, before settling again into a hush. The ceremony began. On stage, voices read stories of endurance as though they were hymns. Every word was weighted, every sentence measured by sleepless nights, medical charts, and relentless hope. Harry sat stiffly, hands folded, listening not as a prince but as a father, a man who knew what it was to want to protect a child at all costs. When it was his turn to speak, he rose into the lights. The applause came, but it wasn't thunderous. It was steady, respectful, like the audience was guarding his space rather than flooding it. He thanked the families. He praised the children. He spoke of stubborn hope and everyday miracles, his voice steady but low, as if meant for a single listener. He did not mention palaces, or lawsuits, or estranged brothers. He did not speak the name of Meghan or of William. He let his words stay here, in this room, for these families. But the city outside would not be ignored. As he spoke, a bass note of chanting seeped through the walls. It was faint but relentless, a reminder that London had not gone to sleep. Security guards shifted uneasily at the edges of the room, murmuring into earpieces. One young guard barked too loudly into his mic, and a mother waiting with her son laid a hand on his arm, whispering, "It's all right. This is London. London always sounds like this." Harry continued, weaving stories of the children into his message. And then, a moment that froze the room. A boy with oxygen tubes asked innocently if Harry ever missed playing video games with his brother. The question hit like a thunderclap. The room stiffened, breath caught in every throat. Harry froze, his eyes unfocused, lost for a heartbeat too long. Then he smiled faintly and said, "I was always better at the driving games." The boy laughed, and the tension broke, but the pause had already written itself into history. When he finished, the applause came again, softer than before but full of weight. Families lined up for photos, Harry crouching, kneeling, smiling until his cheeks burned. His hand ached from handshakes, his arms heavy from embraces. A father with tattoos blinked rapidly, refusing to let tears fall. A girl whispered, "Thank you," as if it were a secret meant only for him. Outside, the protests raged. Police horses reared against the press of bodies, flares painted the night sky red, and chants of "Down with the Crown" clashed against cheers of "We love you, Harry." The city was tearing itself apart over him, even as inside, children laughed at his jokes and parents whispered blessings into his ear. When the ceremony ended, the applause rolled once more, then faded into silence. But as Harry stepped back toward the doors, the noise of the city surged up to meet him again. He straightened his shoulders, exhaled, and prepared to face the storm waiting beyond the foyer. The car pulled away from the hotel long after midnight, the streets slick with rain and smoke from spent flares. The Well-Child Awards had ended with applause, but the storm outside had only sharpened. Reporters tracked the convoy, their camera lights bouncing off the wet pavement, trying to guess where Harry would go next. Few knew the truth. A private meeting had been arranged, a father and son set to face each other under the weight of the crown. At Clarence House, lights still burned behind drawn curtains. Inside, King Charles paced a room lined with portraits of ancestors who had ruled through wars and betrayals, their painted gazes heavy with judgment. He looked older than his 76 years tonight. His illness had left its traces, but his posture remained rigid, the posture of a monarch who understood survival was an act of will. Advisers lingered in the hall, their voices hushed but urgent. Every word leaked to the press could alter the balance of a family already splintering. And one absence screamed louder than any presence. Prince William would not attend. His aides had made it clear, the Prince of Wales had other commitments, but the truth was plainer. William did not want to be in the same room. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. The wound was too raw, the trust too broken. The empty chair beside the king was not just a missing seat. It was a symbol, a fracture widened into a chasm. Harry's convoy slid through the gates, tires crunching on gravel slick with rain. The doors opened, and he stepped out under the glare of lanterns that had once welcomed prime ministers and foreign dignitaries. Tonight, they lit only for him. He moved quickly, head down, as though refusing to give the cameras any more than they had already stolen. Inside, the staff froze, unsure whether to bow or look away. His footsteps echoed through halls heavy with secrets and betrayals. The king stood waiting. No embrace. No handshake. Just two men measuring each other across a gulf of history. The silence was suffocating until Charles finally said, "It has been a long time." "Too long," Harry answered. They spoke in brittle tones, Charles about service and duty, Harry about truth. Meghan's absence lingered unspoken, her shadow stretching across the Atlantic. William's absence loomed larger still, a third figure in the room no one dared name. What was said will never be fully known. Some claim voices rose, others that the meeting was calm and diplomatic. The truth was likely both, anger and restraint tangled together. When Harry emerged hours later, one aide swore the king touched his shoulder briefly, another said Harry left exhausted, not defeated. By dawn, the palace machine had spun its version, dignified, private, modest. Courtiers whispered otherwise, that it was raw, stormy, fragile. But those whispers stayed hidden. Back at his hotel, Harry sat in silence. Reconciling with his father might be possible. With his brother, the war had only just begun. By morning, London was already burning with words. Headlines hit like artillery. Father and son reunited. Healing at last? Or just theater? The palace released nothing, proving again that silence is its sharpest weapon. But the press? They did what they always did, feast. Television anchors replayed grainy footage of Harry slipping into Clarence House. Pundits speculated wildly. Some claimed the meeting had been a breakthrough, that the king's frailty had softened the distance. Others swore it was stage-managed survival, a way to stop the monarchy from cracking in public view. The softer papers called it a family trying to heal. The harsher ones spat that it was a circus act with velvet curtains. And then came the internet. Memes erupted like fireworks. A clip of Harry saying at the Well-Child Awards that he was better at the driving games than William spread like wildfire, edited with old footage of the brothers racing toy cars as children. Hashtags trended. Hashtag royal healing. Hashtag end of the crown. Hashtag Diana would be proud. Others were more vicious. Hashtag traitor Harry. Hashtag spare no more. Every side claimed him. Every side tore at him. He had never been more visible, or more divided in meaning. Meanwhile, outside Buckingham Palace, the crowd swelled again. What had begun as protest lines now looked like a siege. Torches flickered against the black iron gates, their flames licking the night like the memory of revolutions long past. The chant split into three currents. One demanding compassion for Harry, another demanding penance for Andrew and the institution itself, and another demanding the monarchy's end altogether. The chants collided and braided until the air itself felt heavy with contradiction. Tourists stumbled into the storm, unsure if they were witnessing a protest or a pageant. Some posed for photos, red buses in the background, while others were pulled into the current of voices. The police line strained, shields banging, horses stamping nervously as the crowd pressed harder. And in the middle of it all, Harry made his most dangerous decision yet. He went out walking. Not behind tinted glass, not shielded by guards, but into the open, into Green Park, where the flowers had multiplied overnight into a blanket of paper notes and blooms. The crowd parted just enough to let him pass, their phones held high like a forest of black mirrors. He walked slowly, reading none of the messages, letting the flowers and cards speak for themselves. A woman pressed her forehead to a note, whispering silently. A fan asked for a photo. He crouched, smiled faintly, and obliged, even as a man shouted something cruel. The fan flinched. Harry ignored the insult, thanked her by name, and moved on. The heckler lowered his eyes, because shame is older than slogans. The sky darkened, heavy with unspent rain. Then a child in a cardigan, clutching daisies too large for his hands, looked up and asked, "Do you miss your grandmother?" Harry froze, then answered softly, "Yes, every day." The boy nodded solemnly, returning to his flowers. For a moment the crowd hushed, as if the city itself bowed, but only for a moment. The chants soon rose again, louder than before. By the time his convoy rolled back to Heathrow, London looked drained, like a city recovering from fever. The flares had burned out, chants turned to hoarse echoes, but the tension lingered like static before another storm. Cameras swarmed the airport. Harry strode quickly to his plane, face unreadable, neither triumphant nor defeated. At the stairs he paused, glancing back at the skyline where his father worked late into the night and his brother kept his silence. Then he climbed aboard, engines roaring. The palace offered nothing but silence. Dignified, private, modest, was all that filtered out. No mention of William, no word on protests, no acknowledgement of the fracture that split the House of Windsor. In Scotland, Charles resumed duties with a polished smile that did not reach his eyes. In London, William pressed on with engagements, his silence on Harry louder than any statement. And across the ocean, Meghan and the children remained in California. Images of Archie and Lilibet surfaced briefly, school runs, playdates, pancake breakfasts, ordinary moments that felt like another world entirely. The Atlantic had become more than water. It was a wall. The public, too, divided into camps, each claiming ownership of the narrative. For some, Harry was the brave son, returning to honor his grandmother and stand by his causes even in the face of hostility. For others, he was the exiled prince who had forfeited his right to sympathy, daring to return only when it suited him. The debate filled talk shows, tabloids, and social media feeds, each side shouting until meaning itself began to dissolve. But in quieter places, in parks, in kitchens, in late-night conversations, the question that lingered was more human. Could this family ever repair itself? Could a father and son truly bridge the gulf? Could brothers reconcile after years of bitterness? Or had the monarchy chosen survival over sentiment once and for all? Harry himself gave no answers. Back in California, his first public move was silence. No interviews, no statements. Only a single photograph released days later, Harry with his children, smiling faintly in a garden, the California sun casting light where London's sky had held only gray. It was a picture painted for peace, but beneath it lay the weight of a storm unresolved. For the monarchy, the message was clear. The crown would protect itself before it protected blood. That had always been its law, but now it had been written in real time, in headlines and chants and tears. Harry's visit had not closed a chapter. It had torn one open. And the next page, still unwritten, could tilt toward reconciliation, or collapse. So as the engines carried him away and the palace walls stood unyielding, the story ended not with a bow or a wave, but with a question. Was this the fragile first step toward healing, or the opening salvo in a war that could undo the House of Windsor from within? And that's where you come in. What do you think Harry's return truly means? Was it courage or defiance? Healing or rebellion? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. And if you want more of the untold truths and hidden battles shaking the monarchy, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and ring the bell icon. Because this story is not over. In fact, the next revelation may change everything.